Okay, so another feature that I want to cover this week is this concept of destructuring. And what is destructuring? So a fun word in JavaScript that really means breaking into pieces. And so what we have as we're working more with objects and we're working more with arrays is we have these data structures with a lot of data in them, and it can become useful to take all that data and break it into smaller pieces. And so when it comes to destructuring or breaking into pieces, we typically we destructure both arrays and objects. Okay, so I kind of want to do that with you guys in this video. We're gonna learn how to do that with a newer feature in JavaScript called the spread operator. Okay, so we're going to destructure objects and arrays using the spread operator. Okay, so let's kind of start with a simple array. And this is going to be an array of letters. And nothing fancy. Type this up real quick. And so, to kind of start this off, we can break this apart without using any new features, right? So in JavaScript, if you just wanted to store the first element, you could destructure this without anything new in JavaScript, and you would just, and you could probably imagine, what this is going to print out. And if I run this in the terminal using Node, this is in fact destructuring. And of course, if you want to do it again, well, you do this. And if I run that in the terminal, you could see how you can break the array apart into smaller pieces, right? So that's this concept of destructuring, a fancy JavaScript word that means taking something bigger and breaking it down into smaller pieces. So what we've written here is not a big deal, just kind of a starting point. So how can we write this in a more condensed way? And so instead of doing different variables to destructure an array, you do the const keyword and you actually put brackets on the left. And inside those brackets, you put the name of variables. So we're actually creating two variables here, first and second. And then on the right-hand side of the assignment operator, we just have the equals. And so the way that this is going to work is, of course, first is going to be assigned the first element in the array. Second is going to be named the second element in the array. And you can name this whatever you wish. Okay? So using this one line of code kind of replaces what we had before. And if I save that and run it, you could see it functions just the same. But this is the new, a newer feature in JavaScript, right? Destructuring an array is newer. If I wanted to take this a step further, maybe I don't want B and I want to extract C, right? So what if I want A and C, I don't want B? Well, I guess you could do another third and then just skip you know, you could just not use it, but well, that doesn't seem too happy. Let's go ahead and bring in the use strict to make the squigglies go away. Well, the syntax way of doing this without getting that error is actually just not including it, right? So you notice now we have the extra comma, and of course A will go into first, nothing will go into second, and into third goes C. Run that to demonstrate it, and now you see we get A and C on the output. Now, I mentioned using the spread operator, which I haven't demonstrated yet, right? All I've done is just this feature called destructuring. I haven't used the operator. The spread operator is simply 3 dots. Okay, aka these 3 dots right here. And a confusing thing for most people is the spread operator. It's kind of like the plus symbol. What do we know about the plus symbol? Well, depending on its context, it can do different things. Okay, so when we have the plus symbol with strings, we call that concatenation. When we have the plus symbol with numbers or integers, we do addition. So in some cases, the operator, the plus, does addition. In some cases, it does concatenation. Well, depending on the context, by the way, that's called an overloaded operator. The operator has multiple purposes. Okay, this spread operator also has multiple purposes. It can also operate as the rest operator. And so again, just kind of depending on its context. So notice we have well, let's just kind of bring this back. I'll do first and second. Okay, and then I'm going to use this operator here, second. And I'm going to put a third one here. Then I'm going to call the rest. Okay, so here's the operator, the 3 dots. And what this variable, we're creating a variable here. If we console log it, you're going to see the variable. Again, you could call it whatever you like. You could call it remaining or what have you. It's going to create an array with everything that has not yet been destructured. So A has been destructured, B has been destructured. The rest should hold an array of C, D, and E. And you can kind of see that in the output. Okay, so let's see how this can be used. Which, again, these kinds of things are very common in React, right? So destructuring arrays and using them in this context. Okay, so when you have an array and you want to make a copy of that array, it's very common. So let's just say array 1 is A, B, and C. Okay, so again, how we can use this to our advantage, this operator, is making a copy of array 1 and array 2 and putting them into one new array. So I'll say new array equals, and we will spread array 1, comma, and spread array 2. So this is making a copy of array 1 and then appending what's in the second array. And now if I console log new array, so this is an example of combining multiple arrays together. And you can see that that is done. So it's very common to make copies of arrays using this operator. So we're copying all the elements out of 1, and then we're appending a copy of all the elements of array 2. Okay, here's another example of making basically a copy of an array. So I'll say const array clone equals spreading array 1. And then we can add maybe array clone dot push, the number 6. And then console log array clone. And let's console log array. Console log array 1. And so we've effectively made a copy. So a very useful operation using the spread feature is to copy an array. Bless you. Okay, another way that this can be useful and will be used in React is the following. So let me ask this question, and I've asked this question repetitively. How many inputs can a function have? How many parameters can a function have?
One or many.
It is 0. It can't take 0. So 0 to many. So 0 to many. So a function doesn't have to have an input, but it can obviously take many. How many items can a function return?
1.
Can return 0 or 1, right? So a function inputs are 0 to many. A function return is 0 or 1. But it's actually pretty common. It's pretty common for developers to want a function that returns more than one piece of information, right? So there's kind of this built-in limitation on the way functions work, is that they can only return one piece of information. But using this technique, we can actually write a function that returns an array, and as we know, an array can store multiple pieces of information. Right? So if we write an array that a function that returns an array, we can use destructuring then to store multiple pieces of information from that function call. Okay? So copying an array is one useful, method that I've demonstrated, but we can also destructure function returns. again, if a function returns an array with multiple pieces of information, we can destructure that. So let me write a quick function here. I'll do it here. I'll say sum and multiply. Input 1 comma input 2. Okay, so we're making a function that has two inputs and is going to return an array of both the inputs added, so input 1 plus input 2, comma, input 1 times input 2. Okay, and because again this is an arrow function, we can write it as such. Get rid of the curlies, get rid of the return keyword. Let's put spaces in there. Okay, so now we have a function called sum and multiply. It takes in a two inputs and returns an array with two pieces of information. And so let's call that function. I'll say const curlies. What's the first piece of information that comes back? It's the sum, comma, and the second piece is the product. Sum and product equals sum and multiply 3 comma 4. And if I console.log sum, the sum is sum, console.log, the product is product. This syntax right here, if you've ever written React hooks, this is what the syntax of a React hook is. So on the left we have destructuring an array. On the right we have a function call. That function returns an array with two pieces of information, obviously the sum and the product. So those are use cases for this operator, which again, in some contexts you'll hear it called the spread operator. In some contexts you hear it called the rest operator. That is in this case, it's the spread operator when we're doing this copy, because we're spreading apart this array 1 and making a copy, right? It's the rest operator in a different context. So specifically in this video, we've really just been using it. I think with one exception, it's only been the spread operator. The one exception was that rest operator when I said, first comma second comma dot 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 rest. In that case it's referred to as the rest operator. You'll also hear it called the rest parameter, which I think I want to demonstrate. I can demonstrate the rest parameter pretty quickly, so let me kind of back this up. And I'm going to make a function. I'm going to make two functions real quick, and I want to explain the usefulness of this, what's called the rest operator. If I take a function called add, Okay, and this function has two inputs, input 1, input 2, and I'm going to return input 1 plus input 2. Okay, so add two numbers together. In the programming world for a long time, input 1, comma, input 2, comma, input 3. Return the three inputs added together. Well, you would have to give these different identifiers, right? In some languages, you're allowed to have functions with the same name. And you can kind of see here in JavaScript, it's not allowing us. So you might better identify this as add2 and add3, right? So what do we want to do? Well, what if we wanted to add 4? We'd have to write another function. What if we wanted to add 5? We'd have to write another function. What if we would add 15? Right? So very quickly you could see how your code would become bloated with a bunch of different functions that all essentially do the same thing. You just don't know how many inputs, right? You don't know how many inputs. And so console.log add, passing it add 2, adding 2 and 2, and console.log add 3, 2, 2, and 2. Okay, so what I want to talk about just very briefly is this REST parameter that solves this problem, right? When you have a function and you really don't know the number of inputs that you're going to need, like in the future, right? So if I run this, you can see we have our two functions, and we don't really know, how many functions we would have to create in the future. So instead of this, let's just make a function called add. And notice in the inputs, I'm just going to say numbers. So this is called the REST parameter. This is called the REST parameter. And I'm going to return, it actually generates an array for us because we don't know how many elements that we're going to essentially add together. This numbers is going to come in as an array. And so let's loop through the numbers like we just kind of went through all these useful array methods. Numbers dot for each number. Let's just return the number. We're just going to spit it out in a for each loop. I think that syntax will do the trick. Now, here's another little, const sum is 0. We'll write a standard for loop that'll loop through numbers.length, sum plus equals numbers sub index. Just write our own little accumulator. Remember, I called this an accumulator. And then we return the sum at the end. Oh, I forgot an equal sign. There we go. Okay, we've never called. Let's see, sum is a constant, so let's change that to let. Okay. And let's put a semicolon to make you happy. And okay, so now we have this function called add. Point is it takes in a, this is a REST parameter. It's the same syntax as the spread operator. And it's just going to return the sum of however many things we added in. So if I console.log, again, this makes our methods much more flexible, add, and I pass in one number. Let's just pass in two numbers. Okay, you can see the output is 3. But now I have this add method, and I can add in. Okay, and I've written this one method now that will be much more flexible. So that's a very useful way of using this operator. Okay, I'm going to continue on this video, and we're going to destructure some objects now. And so we've destructured arrays, and I have demonstrated the rest parameter that goes in as a parameter into a function. But now we're going to destructure some objects. And so I'll go ahead and spin up a quick object, which is me. Okay, so we have a person object, and to destructure this, it's going to be similar but different. Of course, it's an object now, so we used to have brackets, and now we're working with curlies. And what we want to do is we want to extract the information, and in this case, we have two properties, the name property and the age property, and we can destructure that by creating two variables, name and age, equal to person. Okay, so this is going to be the syntax for destructuring an object. And you are going to notice that my variables that I'm creating on line 9, I'm creating two variables, they have to match the name of the properties as a requirement. We'll kind of see how we can work around that. But if I console.log name is age years old, something simple like that. Now this is kind of not a problem. Okay, so this is how we destructure objects, and we do have to know a little bit about what's in the object as far as the properties to match. Now, if you want to change the property name, and if you want to change your variable name, we can do so with a colon. Maybe you want to call this the first name. And let's separate that. Right, so this is renaming the property into a first name variable. So that's the syntax on getting that to work, and that's still just the same. We can also work with the spread operator. So this is destructuring, this is not spreading. Okay, so let's work with the spread operator. I'll add another property here called my favorite food, and we'll keep it simple, right? So now we'll take the name variable first, make a copy, and then rest. So the rest here, we can print out the name. Just console log name. And let's console log rest. And like you might guess, it'll take the age in the pizza and make a new variable, an object variable called rest. And so when I spit that out, you could see Evan is a single variable. Rest is an object that holds everything else. You're always going to put this spread operator second here because, you know, if you had a bunch of different individual things that you were destructuring, you'd put those first, and then all the properties that come after that come at the end of the parameter list, if you will. Very similar to what we did with arrays, We could combine objects together. So if we had Bill is age 40 and his favorite food is candy. We could create a new person, person and person 2, and spread both person and person 2. And then if we console log new person, you're going to take the 3 properties out of this one, the 3 properties out of this one, and spit it out all in one object. In this case, it created a nested object. So is that what I intended? That is not what I intended. This is what I intended. If you don't want that nested object, save. Let me hit save and run. Now, okay, what's happening here? We're actually overriding the name property. So because these properties are the same name, we're just changing the values. And so what's happening here is it's actually quite useful, because what you see oftentimes is you start by copying an object and then just updating one property. So if I just wanted to start with a copy of Evan and then update the name property to add my last name, right? This is actually something that I've seen quite a bit of. It's like, hey, I'm going to create a new object. I'm going to start by spreading one object and then updating a single property. So again, we will do this in React, where it's like, hey, you want to update something? Let's start with a copy of that object and update a single property. So if you kind of look at that, that's the result that we get. So this line here on line 10 is quite useful. Okay, so we've already kind of seen this syntax here is a very useful operation to create a copy of an array and update a property in that object. Okay, and so that's kind of where I'll stop this one, kind of at a 30-minute video that kind of highlights the spread operator and this concept of destructuring and kind of how they can be useful for us.